So those that watched the Brazilian Grand Prix this weekend will have seen that there's been some choice words, let's just say, about the tyres in Formula 1, particularly the wet weather tyres, which some people are blaming for Formula 1 being unable to compete in qualifying at Interlagos on Saturday afternoon. Of course, we had some really heavy thunderstorms, some incredibly heavy weather, rain weather in that session, and it was basically delayed until Sunday morning as a result. Now, Sir Lewis Hamilton was one of the drivers that criticised Pirelli for this, but it turns out that Fernando Alonso, for once, is actually agreeing with Sir Lewis Hamilton on something. So let's have a look at this story. Now, normally there's an article for this, but I've only got the story itself because the guy who writes these articles, who produces them, is actually off work at the moment, so I'm just going to have to read out from the script basically. There's nothing to show you on screen, guys. You're going to have to look at me instead, which is probably worse in all honesty. But yeah, just going to go into this story now. So Fernando Alonso has joined fellow F1 veteran Lewis Hamilton in his criticism of the wet weather tyres supplied by Pirelli. Seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton gate crashed a live interview in the sodden Interlagos pit lane with Stefano Domenicali as the F1 CEO explained why qualifying had to be delayed for safety reasons. A smiling Hamilton intervened and told the Italian, "You should have sent us out. This is ridiculous. I want to get out. If you give us better wet tyres and blankets, we will be able to run in this. I'm putting you on the spot." The Mercedes driver laughed again. Even on Sunday for the still wet Brazilian Grand Prix, the race became a festival of spins and crashes. Lance Stroll even crashed out on the formation lap, while the decisive red flag waved later on when Franco Colapinto crashed during a safety car period. But they weren't ideal, said the 43-year-old Alonso when asked about the conditions in the race. But then again, we don't have the tyres suitable for the top category of the sport either. When it rains a bit, we always have aquaplaning and accidents, the Aston Martin driver added. I think even Franco behind the safety car, sometimes you can't even keep up with the safety car, the Spaniard insisted. We needed to improve that. Responding to the complaints, Pirelli's F1 boss Mario Sola pointed out that the rain during the Brazilian Grand Prix varied in intensity from mild to extreme, while also pointing the finger at the new track surface. The grip levels in the wet were very limited, partly due to oily layer that it created, said the Italian. All things considered, I believe both the wet tyres proved to be up to the job in hand. However, Isola admitted that Pirelli can certainly improve the wet tyres for the future. That's the goal, he said. For the next season, we've made some improvements, but unfortunately, we've not had the opportunity to do proper testing on a track that's very demanding on the tyres. But we've changed the tread pattern a little bit, worked on the construction and the compound. We've made progress, but I can't say whether it's enough or not, Solar admitted. If we're talking about the lack of performance on rain tyres, it only means that the cars should go slower. We realise that we need to improve the performance, but that doesn't mean our rain tyres cannot be driven. Yeah, I mean, Solar makes some good points there, and one that I'll kind of highlight as well on top of that is that, you know, you've also got the aerodynamics causing a lot of problems when it comes to spray here. So anybody who's driven on the motorway in, well, I was going to say in the UK, but in any country where it's, you know, rained a lot, for example, you'll know the amount of spray that's kicked up by large vehicles such as trucks, lorries and vans and stuff like that. Even your own car produces a lot of spray because of the amount of water that's being kicked up and thrown behind you. Formula 1 is like that, but on steroids. The amount of spray that is produced by these Formula 1 cars because of the amount of air that's being kicked up by the aerodynamics. You know, it's a rooster tail, that's what it's called. You'll see them in any kind of, you know, shot of a Formula 1 car. In fact, I'll put one up there. I always point the wrong way because it's mirrored on my camera. I'll put one up there so you guys can see an example of it. It's what happens every time. So that shows you how much spray is being kicked up. And you've got these Formula 1 cars, 20 of them going around every single lap, and that's a big problem for visibility. I think that's the biggest problem really when it comes to wet weather racing. You know, and you've also, and Sola just highlighted there, the rain did vary in intensity quite a bit as well. We had a lot of problems when it came to the surface of the track as well. A lot of people complaining, I think Alonso also mentioned it as well, you know, his back was hurting during the race. Now that might have been because of the mechanics not doing a 100% complete job on repairing the car. I'm not insulting the mechanics by any means. I'm just saying that they had very little time between the Sunday morning's qualifying and the Sunday afternoon race to repair not only Alonso's car but also Lance Stroll's car as well. You know, Lance Stroll might have gone off because of the damage to his car that was still there. It might not have been fully repaired yet, and you only know that when you get out on track. So I feel like Alonso and Stroll could have suffered that potentially, but also the surface of the track as well. People are complaining about it. It's been resurfaced for this year in Interlagos, but apparently it's very bumpy. apparently, to resurface it in the way they have has not produced the ideal results in terms of performance and quality of the tarmac. So that's got to play a role as well, and in the wet it's going to be even more exaggerated. But just going on to the rain intensity as well, that's something also you've got to bear in mind. So when, for example, it rained really, really heavily, and then we got the safety car and eventually got the red flag for Colapinto's crash, you had some drivers out on the track like Max Verstappen and Esteban Ocon who hadn't stopped yet for new tyres. Them actually stopping for tyres, not stopping for tyres, that will have meant that their cars' tyres were actually worn down some more and would have been more akin to slicks. I mean, yes, they would still have the grooves in, but they wouldn't have been able to clear as much water as actually required to go around that track. In those wet conditions, I can imagine it was incredibly hairy. People who actually stopped, though, the George Russells and the Lando Norrises of this world, they would have been on much better tyres and tyres that would have been a lot better suited to the conditions, so they wouldn't have aquaplaned as much. Now, I can't speak for the drivers in terms of aquaplaning all the time like Alonso's talking about. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, when it comes to clearing the water, the intermediate tyres and the full wet tyres are actually able to clear an incredible amount. The full wet tyres can clear 100 litres of water a second at 200 miles an hour, which, when you think about what 100 litres of water looks like, that's a lot of water, man. That is a lot every single second. So the problem is not necessarily how much the tyres can clear. It might be to do with the composition of them. It might be to do with how they're actually produced and how effective they are when they get worn down and when they're in extreme wet conditions. Like, we don't run the full wet tyre very often at all. It's often quite common for the safety car to really come out when we reach even intermediate conditions, even the upper echelons of intermediate conditions. So running a race with the full wet tyres on is really, really rare today in Formula 1 because of the spray. The race control, the race director actually makes that decision to neutralise the race with a full-on safety car and just keep them running around slowly rather than with full racing speed for safety reasons. So there's a lot of factors at play here. I don't think Pirelli are necessarily to blame here. I feel like the bigger problem really is the spray, and the spray is produced because there's so much water on the track, and if there's so much water on the track producing so much spray, then you can't, there's no easy way to clear it. It's just the way Formula 1 cars are. They've experimented with things like the spray guards and stuff like that in the past, but those results, I mean, I've spoken to Mario Sola a number of times, I really do, he's a great guy, and their experiment, he freely admits that the experiments they've done with these spray guards have not produced good enough results, so they're trying to figure out ways to solve it. And one more thing I will bring up in this little thing, because listen, I'm an engineering graduate, I love talking about things like the technical aspects of Formula 1, like the tyres and stuff like that, right? One more thing I will bring up is that people will say, well, back in my day, the tyres were much better when it was the tyre wars with Michelin and Bridgestone. I mean, I'm not going to get into that whole argument now, but what I will say is that there's always been challenges when it comes to wet weather tyres in extreme rain conditions. Look at how many people fell off the road in Malaysia 2002. And I'm having to go quite a bit back in time here because the tyre wars were only in place until 2007, I think Michelin left the sport after that. Off the top of my head, it's around there. So I'm going to go back quite a bit in time here. But the more recent examples of having this tyre war and the competitive kind of competition, the war as it was between those two companies, it's a long time ago. It's 20 years ago now, nearly. And look at Brazil in 2003. I know the track was different then, and we had things like the bottom of the CNRS really causing problems for cars, and we saw a little bit of that this week as well with Russell. I mean, Russell was so struggling, so bad to get the throttle down in some corners like the CNRS, for example, and Lando Norris just clean drove around the outside of it. So there always has been it's been a really tricky track at Interlagos in a lot of senses. That's part of the reason why we love it. But when it comes to purely driving in the wet, it's a real handful because of the uphill and downhill nature of the track. You'll have some areas of the circuit, like the top part of the circuit, the main pitch straight, or maybe some of the corners that are further up, and then you've got the corners further down. The ones further up, they'll be generally dry, but the ones at the bottom of the hill, as it were, they will be forming a lake. They won't be between the lakes, they will be the lake. They won't be Interlagos, they'll just be Lagos. But you know, that's kind of my thoughts on it, guys. I want any of your thoughts in the comments below as well. Are Pirelli's wet weather tyres good enough? Are they to blame for what is going on in Formula 1 with the wet weather running and how apprehensive we are for it? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And of course, keep it subscribed to the F1Chronicle.com to see much more content and news reaction to the world of motorsport, but also the world of Formula 1 mainly. Yeah, like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell as well, and we'll see you very soon, guys. Have a good one.